Well, Peter Lorre couldn't do it either. Hello there folks, I'm the Lon Chaney Reviewer, and welcome to Silent Links, the series where I analyze the films of filmmakers and actors who were once great in the silent era, but must now deal with the mysterious challenge of talkies. Today's episode correlates with Metropolis because the director of both films was legendary German auteur Fritz Lang. His last two films, one of which was Metropolis, both had flopped. And Fritz Lang now had to deal with sound film, something he was somewhat opposed to, needless to say. So he had to find a way to adapt sound to his own purposes and make a commercial hit. What we have is that result. M tells the story of a child murderer, played by Peter Lorre, who is being tracked down not only by the police, but also by the criminals for accidentally disrupting their criminal activity. One of the best scenes in the film that I can note takes place within the first 5 or 10 minutes of the film. It's a very creepy scene, and let me see if this is going to be really creepy in just a second. Wait a minute. It's going to be really creepy. Bingo. That's the shadow of Peter Lorre, the character of Hans Beckert, one of the creepiest and most disturbed characters in all of cinema. His entrance in the film is interesting because you do not see his face. In fact, it's not until later on in the film when you see his face. And when you do see his face, it's through a mirror. It's an interesting technique that Fritz Lang uses, where it's a film about deception, among other things. Fritz Lang, being an expert silent filmmaker, uses certain techniques where we know that the girl is dead. For instance, as opposed to seeing the dead body or seeing Peter Lorre about to stab her with his knife, we see images of a rolling ball or a balloon flying away, symbolizing the fact that this little girl is in fact a goner, trapped by the balloon, and she is no more. This is Peter Lorre's third count of manslaughter in the film, and this causes an uproar not just for the police, but for the criminal element within Berlin. What's interesting about the criminal element in this film is the fact that it seems like the police doesn't generally bother them. You get the impression that they're aggravated not just because they're getting blamed or their police are searching for the character Hans Beckert, which Peter Lorre plays, to see if he's among them, but it's disrupting their illegal activity. It's more of a matter of business rather than, oh my god, look at this horrible monster that's killing children. I mean, yeah, they kind of know that, but it really doesn't sink into their head until much later on in the film, which I'll explain how that happens. As great as Peter Lorre's performance is, the best part of this film is the relationship that the police have with the criminal element. And it's like, just like I said earlier, it feels like the criminals don't always get caught for their crimes, or the police usually turn a blind eye on them. Once Hans Beckert comes in the picture and starts, killing young children, the police are like, you know what, we gotta appear like we're doing something, so we have to search for the criminals. So it makes the police, so that police are making themselves look good and the criminals look bad. And the criminals are hunting down Hans Beckert to get vengeance on him, and that way they can be left to their common criminal practices. Another one of my favorite ideas in this film is the idea of the scapegoat. Like I said, with the police using the criminals as a scapegoat, there are other instances of scapegoats within the film. An elderly man is asking a little girl where she lives. That way, he could take her home and not be alone this, very dark and creepy night. However, people start to think, this guy must be the murderer. That has to be the loser that's killing everybody. And it's interesting. It's like people are willing to pick a scapegoat. It makes me think of like Nazi Germany, where Hitler, used non-Aryans as the scapegoat for all the economic problems that happened to Germany, and also the scapegoats, that way he could eliminate them using his final solution. And with these themes in mind, you can easily realize why people perceive this as a very anti-Nazi film. Fritz Lang himself was had a Jewish heritage but was not raised Jewish, and was very much opposed to the Nazi Party, whereas his wife, Thea von Harbo, who co-wrote the screenplay, embraced the Nazi ideology, and eventually the two of them divorced. And Fritz Lang ultimately left Germany and went on to become a filmmaker of such films as Ministry of Fear or Secret Beyond the Door. It's also interesting to note that the film is also, a good chunk of it is silent. It's estimated that about a third of M is essentially a silent film, except there is no musical accompaniment in M, or at least any musical accompaniment that goes with the opening and closing credits. The only music that you end up hearing is the character of Hans Becker whistling the tune of In the Hall of the Mountain King, a very ominous tune. And it's very much one of the earliest uses of the leitmotif, a theme that would address a character or a particular portion of the film. For example, the dun 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 of Jaws. Or in Star Wars, you have the Imperial March representing the Empire. Or in King Kong, that movie's filled with leitmotifs, with the romantic theme and the Kong's theme. A lot of the older, especially older films and even silent film scores that are made today, use leitmotifs because it's a very effective way of addressing a theme or a character's ideas. Needless to say, I think Peter Lorre is fantastic in this film. This is really a performance that defined the rest of his career because essentially he'd be playing creepy characters for the rest of his life. I mean, there's a few exceptions here and there, like Conseil and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but the rest of his career was filled with, for the most part, creepy characters. Especially, and also in the Criterion Collection, it's interesting to note that they recently picked up The Man Who Knew Too Much, another Peter Lorre film, and it was his first English-speaking role, if I'm not mistaken. And it's very effective, and he had to learn English phonetically. And he mostly got the part, when he was interviewed by Hitchcock, he mostly got the part by laughing and smiling, which I think is rather interesting. And also, when I was reading up information about the film, Peter Lorre was a comedic actor before M, and this film really totally changed his career forever. Towards the end of the film, this is going to be a spoiler alert, in the third act, Peter Lorre is being chased down by the criminal element of Berlin and is ultimately captured and brought to an underground kangaroo court. This is where we finally get a lot of Peter Lorre's perspective, or so it may seem. We get probably one of the most powerful monologues in any film, where he discusses the fact that, oh, you criminals are lazy. You know, if you found a trade or found a job, you could stop your crime easily. But me, I have a demon inside of me. I can't control this. What I really enjoy about the film, though, is I really appreciate that Fritz Lang takes a more ambivalent view. It's a very neutral point of view. You don't really know if Peter Lorre really does think that he's insane. He might be just convincing himself, or he might really be insane. However, at the end of the day, it's a matter of, do you think this man deserves the mercy of a real trial and a real court? That's up to the audience, and it's not a question I'm going to be answering today. At the end of the day, though, the real people who still suffer are the mothers. The mothers and all the women, female characters in the film, are the only genuinely sympathetic characters in this movie. And at the end of the film is a really creepy shot of the three mothers, and they're crying, and they address the audience, you should watch our children, all of you. And it really is like saying, look, it doesn't really matter whether or not the criminals have killed or didn't kill, or if the police gave mercy to Hans Becker. What really is tragic is the fact that these mothers are left without their children. And for the most part, the police and the criminals really don't care about those people. I mean, the only time when the criminals really start caring about the children is when one of the, I would presume a prostitute, but I don't want to be that offensive, but she's a member of the criminal kangaroo court, and she mentions The fact that she's like, you probably never lost a child. And that's when the criminals are like, yeah, okay, we'll go with that. That justifies it enough. It took you that long to justify the act of capturing this man and nearly killing him. Even after over 80 years is so gripping. It feels very modern and very fresh. There are still a lot of unanswered questions, and questions that might not ever be answered. Is Hans Beckert innocent? Does he deserve mercy? And should the police and the criminal element really reconsider why they're doing certain things? I just want to give a little end note before I depart today and film my Metropolis review. This is the 110-minute cut of M. This was at the time that this was released, this was the longest cut in existence. But not too long ago, there was a recent restoration of M. I believe it was 7 or 8 minutes, might have been 7 minutes, that was added onto M, a new restoration, and it was at the Film Forum in New York, I want to say maybe a few months ago. Sadly, I didn't check it out, which I'm really disappointed I didn't do that. But that restoration's under Kino, and I don't know if they're planning on doing a DVD or Blu-ray release. So right now, your best bet is the Criterion Blu-ray or DVD, which has some very good supplemental features, a very informative commentary track, interview with Fritz Lang, and hosted by William Friedkin, college lectures about the film M, Claude Chabrol's adaptation of M because M was one of his favorite films, and a few other bonus features that should satisfy you for a few hours. I hope I'll see you guys on Silent Film Saturday, and I hope, if you've never seen M before, I really suggest you check it out. It's a very gripping film, not just from 1931, but for all times. And if you've seen M before, I think it's time to revisit the film and whistle in the Hall of the Mountain King. I'll see you guys later.